Is you rolling? Is you rolling? Is you rolling? Is you rolling? Wish I might be. Wish I might be. Wish I might be. Wish I might be. Girl, he geeked up. Girl, he geeked up. Girl, he geeked up. Girl, he geeked up. Wish I might be. Wish I might be. Wish I might be. Wish I might be. Yeah, strong and that's where I come from. That's that boy wasn't put his ring on your tongue. Now everything was ready till your push came in. About the same time that that thing hit me. I said it really pretty when she got a nice body. I'm geeked up thinking this was it about it. At your level chillin' cause you look like Janet Jackson. I'm a free double Jackson. I'm looking for that action. Pushing man, you stupid man. I love the way you flowing. Blind in my drop when I don't know where I'm going. On to where it's live, I keep riding a sucker. The inside of my eyes smelling like I found a bumper. Wish I might be. Wish I might be. Wish I might be. Wish I might be. Might be. Might be. Might be. Might be. DJ Smokey 666, bitch.
Ready, set, and begin.
Smoked out positive squad.
Connected to Bluetooth line.
I know you're gonna dig this.
Fuck, what up, what up, what up, what up, what up? Yeah, 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 yeah. Coming through with your quarantine confessionals. Ain't nothing like riding the clock, baby. You know what I'm saying? That's like a on the clock vacation. What you doing? Nothing. Getting paid. What you doing? Nothing. At work. How you doing? Nothing at work, man. I'm riding the clock out, bro. Trying to milk this motherfucking cow, boy. Milk this motherfucker for all it's worth. If you don't know how to milk your job, you ain't been there long enough. You don't know how to ride the clock out? You ain't been working there long enough. You gotta find your niche. Figure out how to get all your work done in the first half of the day. So the second half of the day, coasting. That's how I do my job, yo. I try to get all my shit done early in the day. The rest of the day, don't ask me to do shit.
We're now going to progress to some steps which are a bit more difficult. Ready, set, and begin.
Riding the clock out.
We're now going to progress to some steps which are a bit more difficult. Ready?
These steps are a bit more difficult.
And begin.
Hit it, maestro.
I was born in Canada.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh, 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 oh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We all gotta work, man. Yeah, yeah. We all gotta work, man. Yeah, yeah. We all gotta work, man. Some got a job and some got a career. Yeah, yeah. We all gotta work, man. Yeah, yeah. We all gotta work, man. Yeah, yeah. We all gotta work, man. Some got a job and some got a career. Yeah, yeah. We all gotta work, man. Yeah, yeah. We all gotta work, man. Yeah, yeah, we all gotta work, man. Some got a job and some got a career. Oh, oh, oh. Some got a job and some got a career. It's a big difference in yeah. And it's a big difference in yeah, yeah, and it's a big difference. Cause to have a career, you gotta spend some years in some higher education, conquering your fears, cause you gotta get that knowledge, precede your peers, and just to get a job, man, you can be a slob and wake up at 8 and still on the wrong in the morning. If you got a job, man, you're just clocking in. But if you got a career, that shit never ends. And if you got a job, man, you're trying to make them ends. But if you got a career, your bank getting big.
I strongly support that these beings are not closely related to any known organism on Earth.
We all gotta work, but some got a job and some got a career. It's a big difference, man. In order to have a career, you gotta go to school for years. Learn to conquer your fears and precede all your peers. Ooh, gold all in my... Hey, that shit was alright when it came my ear. It was a corny ass song, but he killed that shit though. Gold everything, gold all in my... Hey, gold all in my whip. Yeah, gold all in my... Hey. Don't believe me, just watch, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch. Yeah, gold all in my ring. Gold all in my chain. Gold all in my watch. Don't believe me, just watch. All gold, everything. Man, you do not know about that chop and screw. Hey.
Colleges, them bad hoes that spill. Shout out to them freshmen on Instagram, straight flexing.
Just watch, nigga. Gold all in my watch. Don't believe me, just watch. Nigga, 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 don't believe me, just watch. Nigga, 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 don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch.
Smoke.
Smoke, nigga?
Money to build your shorty stacking like a meal type of shit that'll scare ya. Headboard bang off the side of your head, watch how your ass spread, spilling off the side of the bed now. Now what you do to this dread, baby? Your ass really changed what he initially said. Because the nigga dead, but fuck him. Cause now we vibing and talking and shit. I love to hear your ass go. Ass on fire, girl, let your ass on fire. Rip the H2, walk it right in front of your ass. See a little gap between your cut and your ass and make you jump inside another smoke with your ass. I'm saying, the shit is smell like a ranch. The way they ass wiggle, see I got the shit on the smash. Now listen, I let the L spill a whip of the hash and bag all the bitches. Now watch you see me flip and flash. I'm saying, ass on fire, girl, let your ass on fire. Ass on fire, girl, let your ass on fire.
Y'all can't fuck with that Busta Bust, yo. Motherfucker Busta Rhymes. Ass on fire. Ass on fire. Ooh, girl, I'll put your ass on fire.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I know that bitch on me, Lil Perk. Lil Perk hurt, turn the fuck up. I know that bitch on me, trying to make that halo on you like that. Hey, yeah. Double cup, to be coming home. I think I got good for your girl, she a dog. Okay, yeah, lean, double cup, we can lie, okay.
It's changing every
What up, guys? Trying to find something to put on this. Already heard that. I keep trying to find some beats for the beat list. Once again, the beat list and got over 100 beats on it, so I really need to run through that shit and start to narrow it down again. Every once in a while, I'll just try to whittle it down to about 80 or 90 beats. But the last couple of beats I put on there were pretty good. I've heard, like, I don't know, man. Any suggestions from the viewers? What do you guys feel like listening to this evening? Yep, in my white tee. Ooh, in my white tee. I'm fly in my white tee. I'm fresh in my white tee. I'm high in my white tee. Yeah. Oh, yesterday, who was that? Wild Turkey told me to listen to, what the fuck was that channel? This dude was talking about the sun. Like, it was basically like a weather report of the sun. Something. Fuck. No? 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 Here it is. Suspicious observers.
There were secret societies that were involved in founding this country. Who were they? And what were...
If I go to their video list, seems like their latest video was from 8 hours ago. So it's only 6 minutes and 36 seconds long. Sunspots growing, weather alerts, solar forcing, SO news, and I can't read anymore without clicking on it. I guess it's SO stands for Suspicious Observers News.
Good morning, folks. We've got a number of key science stories to get to today. Weather and weather alerts. We've got the closest star starting to wake up as well. So let's get started at spaceweathernews.com.
Space
We
Weather
find
News.
the last day on our star was a matter of growing coronal holes, a new active region on the Earth-facing disk, and motion around the limbs. The active regions now do have sunspot umbra beneath the bright arching fields. The new group was born overnight out ahead of the other equatorial group. Neither is too large yet, but development can happen quickly, and this is what we're keeping an eye on today. The solar wind is slightly variable, but wholly within normal ambient stream range, and so expectedly we find geomagnetic conditions all in the green. Well, folks, it's that season in India again. Lightning is a tremendous threat in the region, and every time I checked yesterday, the death toll kept going up. Coming again tonight in the eastern subcontinent. Australia doing its impression of the United States winter right now and messing with the temperatures. Record late season heat is about to give way to a tremendous cold wave. Coming tonight, we've got isolated but very severe warnings for the parts of France under the highest risk here. Meanwhile, overnight tonight we're going to see a bit of heavier conditions in the Midwest, but tomorrow and through the week is where we'll want to weather watch here. Each night the storms grow as the low will ever so slowly take its time creeping across the country. We've got a fun article to start here, and then we start carving. Evidence of bow hunting 60,000 years ago brings up some serious cognitive issues. This should not have been possible for humans at that time, unless something crazy is true, like there were more advanced ancient human civilizations than we realize and they got wiped out by something terrible long ago. But that's crazy, right? Actually, no, there's a 44-episode series on that topic we have called Cosmic Disaster, and it is linked below the video in the description box. If you find yourself here, you're going to want to check that out as soon as possible. Moving on. After Captain Chemtrail and General Geoengineering made the news last week, here are the Sultans of Spray in to remind everyone of the potential unintended consequences. While you may have heard of the drought and flood potential with weather modification, unexpected changes to extratropical storm tracks are also a major possibility. Yet another reason it's a bad idea to play God in the sky. Up next, as climate scientists focus ever more on the ozone, let us recall that Earth's changing magnetic field will allow for ever more solar control over the ozone. UV light helps to make it, but too much can destroy it, and so can the solar protons from large eruptions. We're going to do a quick gear switch to the problems with the new climate models. First up is the inability to replicate the observations of sea ice. In addition to failing to produce reality, CMIP6 models are also having even larger biases than the previous CMIP5 model. Now this can happen when you make the same mistake as it appears the top climate scientists in France have opted for the blue pill. While it is true that they are not required to use the solar particle forcing quite yet, it is astounding to me that almost 3 years after the release of those data sets, we still have allegedly serious climate scientists trying to take the easy way out. Academically shameful. The particle forcing is how we reconcile the numerous correlations between solar forcing and indirect interaction with volcanic aerosols, which is difficult to accomplish without cosmic rays and energetic electron precipitation, which we went over a bit yesterday. Now, last but not least, we are seeing the identification of a simple yet elegant fix for many of the inadequacies of treatment of the whole climate modeling problem. With new information about the global electric circuit, they now have the brilliant idea that effects on the middle atmosphere could potentially have effects on the troposphere below. The middle atmosphere is the stratosphere and mesosphere, the interface region between the topside electric layers and the coupled regions below. Luckily, for about 300 students in choice universities across the globe, and for many of you watching the show, the proper education on the solar effect of these layers and below begins this fall. The top 500 studies in the field, the electrodynamic control of various geophysical phenomena, Weatherman's Guide to the Sun, is only discounted for a pre-order period of few more days. spaceweathernews.com/publications. We greatly appreciate your support. We've got wind map forecasts and shots of our star to close, and of course we'll do this all again tomorrow, right here, but right now it's 5 a.m. in the new Valley of the Sun. Eyes open, no fear. Be safe, everyone. I'm going to tell you the scariest true story ever told. Over thousands of years, in thousands of versions with different names and minute details, but the story always ends the same way, with the next end of the world. We'll give you the short version first, and then the burden of proof will fall here to present the evidence across time and topic that the slow crawl of geology, the wind, water, fire, and tectonic creep is punctuated in rare occasions by disastrous upheaval. The Earth's magnetic field reverses, with dramatic excursion events sprinkled between. They can occur in less than 100 years from plunge to rock bottom. Earth's ongoing magnetic event has already been underway 150 years, into the red zone, and it is speeding up. In early 2019, the magnetic event accelerated to where an update to the world magnetic model was required ahead of schedule for the first time. Well, so far, this has not been causing catastrophic events, but unfortunately there are other aspects to the event coming, both in physical evidence and in the stories told in rock and voice. The sun plays the role of the destroyer. Where the decadal and centennial cycles of activity converge, we find the entire magnetic potential of the sun accessible for what can only be described as a micronova. As unbelievable as that might sound, the evidence will actually show this to be an almost unavoidable consequence of the solar system trip through the galaxy. There is evidence that the crust and mantle unlock at the low-velocity zone. The plates collide and may be worse, triggering volcanoes and sending unfathomable amounts of water into the land, creating surge deposits of bone and earth. The earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis are followed by snow, ice, incredible amounts falling by the yard as Earth's temperature plummets. We'll see evidence at the micro scale of the previous great solar blast, the ways in which humans survived the last great catastrophe, the evidence that similar plans are secretly unfolding beneath our feet, and the evidence demonstrating the cover-up and erroneous geological science that overthrew a course of rediscovery, one that can now lead us to understand that the sun's cyclical passage through the galactic electric sheet is the trigger for the great catastrophe cycle on Earth. Let's begin in the 1700s, with a surge of global exploration in science and the discovery of the evidence for these cycles. A dozen researchers became dozens in the 1800s as more evidence and excitement and terror over the implications of the evidence was mounting in an undeniable charge to science to explain all the evidence. The 1900s saw a further growth of the field. Many researchers gained considerable fame, while others were silenced. The end of the century saw the birth of the plasma universe connection to catastrophism, with the first global study of petroglyphs describing a solar catastrophe in antiquity. The story truly begins, relevantly however, with the man almost certainly responsible for the misdirection of the truth, Charles Hapgood. His Earth crust displacement theory became the torch for the catastrophe cycle, and when it bombed, it took down the entire field with it. We will demonstrate his motive and opportunity to cheat Einstein, that he knew the truth, he covered it up. A key element of that cover-up occurred in the 1960s, when a theatrical, extravagant, and shock-driven Hollywood-style description of the catastrophe was classified by the CIA. That is one mystery. Why this one when so many others had discussed the topic for years, for centuries? Could it be that this one contained something unique? When it was declassified and released in 2016, it was heavily sanitized down to only 57 pages, but even those pages deliver incredible bounty. And that is where we will begin, with just another of the thousands of versions of this story, one we will show to be partly right and partly wrong in the rest of this video, but either way, which endows upon you the mindset required to take this journey with us, as dozens of researchers and CIA co-founder Charles Hapgood himself put out their own versions of the story. Here is Chapter 1 of the only work on the catastrophe that was classified. With a rumble so low as to be inaudible, growing, then fuming into a thundering roar, the earthquake starts. Only it's not like any earthquake in recorded history. In California, the mountains shake like ferns in a breeze. The mighty Pacific rears back and piles up into a mountain of water more than 2 miles high, then starts its race eastward. With the force of 1,000 armies, the wind attacks. Within 3 hours, the fantastic wall of water moves across the continent, burying the wind-ravaged land under 2 miles of seething water coast to coast. Central America suffers the same cannonade. South America finds the Andes not high enough to stop the cataclysmic violence pounded out by nature in her berserk rage. In less than a day, Ecuador, Peru, western Brazil are shaken madly by the devastating earthquake, burned by molten earth fire, buried under cubic miles of torrential Pacific seas, and then turned into a frozen hell. Everything freezes. Man, beast, plant, and mud are all rock hard in less than 4 hours. Europe cannot escape the onslaught. Western Africa and the sands of the Sahara vanish in nature's wrath. The area bounded by the Congo, South Africa, and Kenya suffers only severe earthquakes and wind. Survivors there marvel at the sun standing still in the sky for nearly half a day. As the Arctic basin leaves its polar home, eastern Siberia, Manchuria, China, and Burma are subjected to the same annihilation as South America: wind, earth fire, inundation, and freezing. The Bay of Bengal Basin, just east of India, is now at the North Pole. The Pacific Ocean, just west of Peru, is at the South Pole. Australia is the new, unexplored continent in the North Temperate Zone, with only a few handfuls of survivors populating its vastness. The cataclysm has done its work well, and drives the pitiful few who survive into a new Stone Age. Once more, the Earth has shifted its shell, with the poles moving almost to the equator in a fraction of a day. Again, the atmosphere and oceans, refusing to change direction with the Earth's shell, have wiped out almost all life. After this tumble, we'll join Noah, Adam and Eve, Atlantis, Mu, and Olympus. So that paints a pretty terrible picture. If not for the fact that it was classified by the CIA, it might be worth ignoring entirely as science fiction. And indeed, that version is too extreme. But the evidence does suggest a slightly lesser version of that same event does indeed occur during these upheavals. Now, it is our job to show you the evidence from start to finish, and these are the points we will need to hit to do so. First, we will have to begin with the cover-up, with the manner in which this entire topic of Earth cataclysms went from one of the most important in geophysics to total pseudoscience. It was one of the greatest cover-ups in history. We will then go through the evidence that we have to look to the sun. We'll see how it is cyclically triggered to outburst as we look to the sanitized portion of the Adam and Eve story that is still technically classified but has been leaked past the threshold of action. We'll discover the...
Alright, so let's pause it right there, guys. So, I mean, I listen to a lot of people who really believe that this is an actual part of our history. More notably, people like Robert Schoch, Graham Hancock, even Horace Butler. Dang, I can't think of my other man's name, yo. Fuck. Brian Foster. And these guys do really, really, really good in-depth research about prehistoric civilizations. And a lot of people, archaeologists, anthropologists, Egyptologists, whatever ology they're in, a lot of people say that there is something to the Atlantis myth and the Adam and Eve stories and all these ancient tales. But humans were those people. An advanced civilization, something fucking happened. Something happened and it wiped out most of the people. And the very, very few survivors can only tell like stories of the greatness of the civilization, and then they get mythologized and fucking blown out of proportion and exaggerated. And just the same today, just like all of our technology right now, everything that we have today, presently, if something major happened and wiped out 99% of the population, in fucking 8,000 years, 9,000 years, there will be all these stories of, oh, there was ways that people could communicate at great distances and see each other's faces and talk to each other in their ears, and they could travel, vast distances at great speeds and fly through the air and but what evidence would be left? You know what I'm saying? Every metal and everything rusts and rots away. You know what I'm saying? You ever seen a car sit in a junkyard for 30 years? Imagine that shit in 300 years. And then imagine that shit in fucking 3,000 years. Then imagine that shit in 10,000 years. Ain't gonna hardly be nothing of that shit gonna be left. And so if something catastrophic were to happen to us in our modern times and we were pushed back into the Stone Age, these same stories and myths would still persist, you know what I'm saying? Because we've cloned animals and in vitro fertilization and women getting pregnant without having sex, you know, and shit like that. But thinking that I don't know, thinking that only like other planets get hit by asteroids and shit like that, or like that there's nothing in space that would hit our planet, you know, or there's no funny business that's going to happen with our sun. You know, that's like, oh, that's a million years from now. It could be tomorrow. You know? And the survival rate would be next to zero if uh I mean, there's just a lot of people on the planet. You wouldn't be able to save everybody, absolutely, you know what I'm saying? And then the people in power, would they alert the masses to impending doom, or would they just kind of like let us live our last couple of weeks and, you know, normal bliss until the end, until it's obvious what's gonna happen, you know? Then everybody just has to, you know, like fucking deal with it. I mean, who knows? Some shit I think about a lot of the times, like motherfuckers say, oh, when the world ends, like mankind is gonna destroy the world. It's like, mankind, we're too fucking small to destroy the world, yo. We're too fucking small. We can destroy ourselves and make the conditions on the planet where we can't live anymore. But like some real world altering events, yo, that shit is gonna be like some solar shit or some kind of impact from a extraterrestrial body, like a fucking a comet, yo. Some shit like that. Now that shit would end everything. Like I said, there's contingency plans though. The elite, they always gonna have their little shit ready. And they show you in movies all the time, yo. That movie 2012 was like one of the best ones, yo. It's like cities are literally getting swallowed up in the earth. But if you got that lottery ticket or if you got enough money, you can have you a nice little spot reserved. And then you already know, like, and that's the worst thing about end of the world scenarios. At this moment in time, we know who controls the world, basically, who has control over the most resources and finances of the world. And so these are going to be the people who are protected, and they are going to be the ones to issue a new world. And so once again, with the technology and everything we have now, like, this new world will look completely different. The new world will be something completely different.
nature of the solar outburst from the sequence of events and the evidence left on Earth, the nature of the catastrophe. We'll look into the pole reversal and exactly what it is and what it means for us, the impactors and their connection to the event, and finally, survival into the next age of Earth. It was not until the story by Chan Thomas was put into the public that the science of catastrophism could once again progress. And that story begins with a cover-up that really began with the predecessor organization to the CIA, the Office of Strategic Services. The initial question is, why was this version of the book classified? What makes this version of the story unique? Well, certainly this version of the story is quite extreme, a one-day shift of geologic proportion that sends the sea from its beds and tears the world apart. The most critical aspect of the work is the fact that it highlights a repeating, cyclical nature to the event on Earth. Then again, nearly everyone who studied the catastrophe over the last 300 years came to that same conclusion. In the 1940s, one of the most critical scenes of this theater played out at the North Pole. Major Maynard E. White led the first mission to map and understand the Arctic region, mostly because of navigational concerns and to monitor for Soviet attacks over the pole. When it became
Now, I never really thought about this, but earlier on he mentioned that this report stated when this event occurs that the poles would shift and certain parts of the planet would freeze immediately due to the pole shift. And so okay, so think about this. Now this is piecing some conspiracy shit together. Because I've heard about pole reversals and all this stuff, but never really thought about like the temperature aspect of it. And I don't know, he says he's going to get more in depth to it. And that's the other thing too, like, so does this actually move the planet in some weird way, the entire planet, or does just the electromagnet field of the planet shifts? And so I thought it was just like a shifting of the magnetic north. But would that still have some type of effect directly to the atmospheric temperatures of the planet itself? But if it does, like you said, during this event, you know, certain parts of the planet would totally freeze over. Africa would be okay, and some parts of the northeastern hemisphere would be okay. But so Antarctica is this weird place for the simple fact that they have the Antarctic Treaty, where no country can actually can lay claim to Antarctica because they want to keep it preserved and pristine, and they have all these other reasons for why no country can claim Antarctica as theirs, which is weird because during colonization, you know, the European wants to claim every part of the world as his, every part of the world. And so why is this one part of the world off limits to everyone? And of course, it's just, you know, like the European nations who agreed on this shit. Like, but anyway, what if they do know that there is something under the ice? And what if it is green and less vegetation? And which could lead to two different conclusions. One being, you know, it's just consistent with the cycles of ice ages, but at the same time, if ice ages occur slowly over time, then you wouldn't think to find large amounts of frozen vegetation under the ice. But if it was a flash freeze that took place within, you know, a matter of days, hours, or days, that would indicate a much more traumatic and violent event occurring. Might start looking back into Antarctica again, because like I said, it's just weird. It's all this research. We just want to do the research, and like, do you really though? Because Admiral Byrd said some crazy shit about it back in the day, man. Like, I don't know. And the flat earthers always saying some crazy shit about it. Not saying that I'm a flat earther, but you just gotta listen to everybody. There is some weird shit. I do know that much.
Imperative to locate the magnetic pole position, the scientists found much more than they bargained for when they got their boots on the ground. They found evidence of marine strata, lifted to significant altitude, time after time, and with tropical corals found in that Arctic region strata, complementing the evidence of similar fossils found by Admiral Byrd in Antarctica.
Admiral Byrd.
Both complementing the prehistoric trees unearthed in Norway, which had no rings, indicating that they resided at the equator. All in all, Major White's team believed that they had unearthed 9 levels of catastrophe on the planet. These findings were reported at the Pentagon, attended also by Paul Sipple of the RAND Corporation and presumably members of the Office of Strategic Services, where Charles Hapgood was a key player in geophysics. And working with Major White's findings and Dr. Sippel's experiments, it was concluded that Earth's magnetic pole began slowly accelerating, followed by a whip around the geographic polar region, which somehow tilts the planet back and forth, which is why there is evidence of the polar regions in the same places over and over, because it always tilts right back and appears to have not moved over geologic time. They confirmed the catastrophe aspects of the new mountain range creation and ice age conditions immediately following the great event. Charles Hapgood, Paul Sipple, and the Pentagon are perhaps the most credible advocates of this 10 to 12,000 year cycle of disaster on Earth, especially when you consider what they did next.
What did
Hapgood
they do?
continued his classified life, while also teaching at various universities up through the late 60s. During the 50s, in the years following Major White's Arctic mission, Charles Hapgood stepped into the limelight in his public life
I don't know why
with the
I can't
famous
get a
Earth's
good...
crust displacement theory. It was a much mutated version from what we heard from Major White, where the poles do not go back and forth to the same places, the cycle is twice as long, and instead of a one-day event, it takes thousands of years to complete, and which was easily debunked by modern geophysicists, taking down the entire science of catastrophism with it. That is the famous version with the foreword written by Albert Einstein. That is not disputed, as his work with Hapgood was well known in the years before he died. However, Einstein was likely privy to the same information as Hapgood, and the final book came out after he died. There is no way of knowing if Einstein supported the radically different version that Hapgood eventually espoused. But what we do know is that Einstein saw the cycle of catastrophe and the turning over of the Earth. He was looking for a way to unlock the crust from the low-velocity zone in the years before he died, and we know he never did find a sufficient geophysical mechanism. Hapgood's version of the story, the public one, does not match what he and Sipple delivered to Major White at the Pentagon a decade earlier. It does not match the geological evidence or the timelines as well. Hapgood's versions, again, were easily debunked. Now, Einstein discussed this for years with Hapgood, and the only contribution was a foreword. Maybe, but armed with that foreword, the weak version of crust displacement Hapgood placed over the field had the credibility to do so. The Chan-Thomas version matches the version that somehow got lost between the Pentagon and Charles Hapgood's public life, and it was in fact classified in the years after Hapgood's work, the first work to deviate from that flawed story since the flawed story came out. It plainly contradicts the version that the CIA geophysicist Charles Hapgood was promoting around the world, even if he had promoted a different one in private. and Chan's version got classified, as apparently did that real version of the story reported from what Major White and Paul Sipple provided. Einstein's key problem was the evidence of Greenland's tilting action, but a lack of weight in ice to pull the crust itself. Nobody had ever before discovered a mechanism for how the Earth would actually accomplish this unfathomable disrespect of inertia, basic physics, common logic. Frankly, the explanations blaming the hand of God had about as much evidence as anything else up until that point. That is, until the version Chan Thomas tried to put out. The postlude of Chan's work was not part of the sanitized release by the CIA, but it was included in a 1993 version of the book the CIA apparently didn't feel the need to classify due to the disrepute of the field of catastrophism. Nobody cares anymore. The postlude describes the only potential mechanism for connection of all the evidence from beneath our feet out to the sun. In recent years, the move in cosmology to see the galactic magnetic field structure as coherent, including the central torus and jet model, has run through the national labs and NASA with incredible success. But one of the lesser publicized realizations of this fact is the scaled similarity with the solar system and with Earth's equatorial ion emission. You see, just like the solar system, the galaxy has an electromagnetic current sheet rippling around the equator, separating the coherent fields of north and south. Now, in our solar system, the sheet ripples, wavering around the equator, bringing a spike in ion density and a reversal of the interplanetary magnetic fields. At Earth, although our orbit only crosses the exact solar equator twice per year, the solar electric current sheet hits Earth every 2 weeks and can produce a geomagnetic storm, inducing electric currents in the atmosphere and the ground. Earth is constantly protected by its own magnetic field, but in addition to things like solar flares, simply enduring a every 2 week solar system magnetic reversal and current sheet impact can cause those electromagnetic disruptions. So, what happens when the sun and solar system encounter the galactic version, its spike in density, and its magnetic reversal process? Let's actually add one more element to that puzzle, the dust. In our own solar system, and most we see, there is a dusty plain, like Saturn's rings. Density is low from planet formation over time, but in the galaxy that is not the case. There are dusty remnants of countless nova, and material left over from the star formation events of the galaxy. So the galactic sheet is more ion dense, a galactic magnetic reversal, and a much more dusty region than we find in our own solar system. Now, out of those three, it might seem like the galactic magnetic field reversal and the extra ion and electron density are the scarier propositions than the dust. But in fact, it might be the dust that makes the situation so awful. To understand why, we must investigate a phenomenon known as recurrent nova. There are quite a number of these recurrent nova that we do know of. Here's an interesting picture of one called T-Pix. And by the way, this first image was the T-Pix nova of 1997, and this was the T-Pix nova of 2011. It just goes boom over and over and over again. Beautiful plasma physics swinging into view with how they're pretty sure the eruptive character is when it comes to at least this one recurrent nova. And so what this is here, and this list will be ever expanding, these are the current recurring nova in the Milky Way, with the exception of the one that was just discovered about a week and a half ago, that was in the Large Magellanic Cloud. I don't know if they're going to count that one as being in the Milky Way or not. But take a look over, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th column, where it has a bunch of years. Those are the known outburst years. Just take a look at how many times these ones have actually gone boom, some of them. All of the lectures that students are hearing right now, and some of the best literature reviews on this topic that you can find, very much conclude one thing on this list. It is egregiously under-inclusive. They say that our viewing of the heavens at this level is so nascent that there are almost certainly supernova that we have seen that aren't supernova, that we will see them go boom again, and they will make this list. They believe that there are many with hundreds to thousands of year cycles
that we simply have not seen go boom even once, and when we do, we'll have no idea it's a recurrent nova for hundreds to thousands of years more. And so, come to ask what the trigger mechanism is, and it is currently thought to be close-in binaries that is feeding material down onto one of the other stars and basically causes a thermonuclear explosion on the surface.
There is no doubt that some recurrent nova are binaries feeding material down onto their partners, exploding in dramatic fashion. But this has implications for stars with dusty encounters on their way through the galaxy. Apart from dusty filaments and gaseous clouds, the central current sheet is going to have a higher dust density coinciding with the extra energetic particles. This is due to the same mechanism that allows a static duster to work in your home. That electric field is going to contain a surplus of that dusty material, and indeed, we're learning that the overall may be much greater than we realized. The same mechanism described for recurrent nova binaries works on some level for these stellar dusty encounters, except with the current sheet, we also have a surplus of electromagnetic particles as well, all during a galactic magnetic field reversal. The proposal for what that could mean for a sun that is known to have the ability to produce rare superflare type outbursts already is something close to the stories of our ancestors insisting the sun has a dark side.
Why did this all kick off when they came back from the moon? It's because while probably 90%, maybe more, of the glass on the moon is from meteoritic impact or from volcanism on the moon, probably, there is unquestionably these classes of glasses that are not from volcanoes and that are not from meteorite impacts, specifically the ones that have aluminum-26. The relativistic temperature required for that would require a meteor that to hit the moon big enough such that we would no longer have a moon.
Many astronomers, physicists have hypothesized, that at one time there was an immense solar outburst from the sun, maybe 100,000 times what it is right now. Tommy Gold was one of the first to suggest this hypothesis, and it has been followed up by other people. So many physicists, many astronomers believe that in the past, millennia ago, there was an intense solar outburst, and so I'm going to pursue that.
One that I have been focused on lately has been the antediluvian, the so-called biblical flood, if you will. On average, about every 10,000 years, you can expect a catastrophe to happen. For the most part, the civilization is wiped out. It's a horrendous catastrophe. It wipes out a pre-existing civilization and most of the people on Earth. And so we must start anew.
Through decades of searching the world collaborations with amazing observers like John Herat has amassed the most extensive data set of petroglyph representation of global solar storms, and the most famous of those is the Stickman, which is not amazing by itself, but those dots on each side, found around the world from the exact same time periods, is indicative of shared experience. And the plasma formation called a Z-pinch seems to fit the description of both the drawings and the physics of a solar disaster.
Now, I've seen this as well. I've seen this, someone else talked about this, of this stick figure. It's this weird looking stick figure that has these dots beside it. And people started looking at it a different way and saying, yo, this looks like a solar flare. And they superimpose it over some images of like solar activity and shit, and it's like, it does look very, very similar. And the thing is, like, I forgot who noticed it first, the geologist's name, but he's like, yo, these things are like on different continents. Like, people who you would have thought didn't have any interaction with each other are coming up with this very, very, very similar image. And so they started thinking maybe this was something that could have been seen globally, like some kind of solar event, and this is how they depicted it.
There's two events happening here. When the sun novas, the heat from that nova and also cosmic rays, we get within 8 minutes of when the sun novas. Now, for another 17 to 18 hours, that dust shell is still on the way. It hasn't hit until, I estimate, 17 to 18 hours after the nova. So the first thing happens is the surface is going to get melted and glazed. Ironically, the Torah winds up saying the moon turned red. Well, yeah, it turned red. It just got baked and melted. That's the glazing that Thomas Gold and others had noticed all around the place. Then the dust shell hits 17 to 18 hours later. Several assumptions. One, you can't assume that this dust shell is homogeneous because the evidence we've seen both on the Earth and on the Moon, they have the different samples they brought back from Apollo 11, 16, 17, a few others. They had different chemical compositions. The same stuff they found in the South Pole and other places on the Earth. So when they say it impacts like another meteor, remember, these scientists can't think in terms of a sun noving. What I'm trying to tell everybody, this is not an easy process that happens. It's a complicated one. It's not just the sun. It's not just that the Earth stops its rotation and the oceans keep going. It's also the crust of the Earth, just like the oceans, are going to start banging up against each other. So after the moon gets glazed by and melted by the sun's nova, 17 hours later, the dust shell comes and puts a fresh new load of dust on top of it. I mean, they're grasping for straws because they don't know where else or how else to explain it. Here they get a sample of matter in their hand, and they got a bunch of holes in it. A lot of the samples they're getting from Antarctica and other places, they don't know to try to get the fission tracks. Look for fission tracks. The stuff that came back from the moon in 69 and through the 70s, they were smart enough to look for fission tracks, and they found plenty of them. In fact, all the Gillespie, almost all the Gillespie that I know of, had fission tracks in it, and about 5 or 6 different radioactive elements. Aluminum-26, beryllium-10, a bunch of them, that could only have been formed from a stellar nova. You know, you have to have relativistic temperatures. I don't know what this is, John, here at me, Houston, but I'm going to pick it up because anything that stares at you, you better pick up. It's a glass, but in this sunlight, it's reflecting red, green, like a rainbow. Found a first prism on the moon, John. Something like that. 10 rock frags, a couple of which are, one of which is some interesting black glass along the sides of it. Another of which is covered with black glass, and little glass beads all over the place here, John. Oh, boy. That was one of those structures that's all included with glass. Yeah, so it's glass fracture sets. I think the after on this one will be pretty interesting. Here's a rock with glass splatter all over its body. Hey, Tony, I just picked up one that is in bag 15 that has a black matrix, bluish black matrix with lap-like either clast or phenocryst in it. And it's right behind the limb here. I don't know whether that's what we're looking for or not. Okay, that sounds good, Charlie.
This seems to be one of the main reasons. In fact, all these missions talk about this. They talk about this glass splatter, these glass debris samples they're picking up on the moon, which makes me believe that they were out there looking for glass bladders. They were looking for evidence of solar effects on the moon. And I think that the Chinese went up there on the far side of the moon to do exactly the same thing.
You do that in West Texas and you get a rattlesnake. Here you get permanently shattered soil. How about rolling that one over? No way. Whitish to gray with a lot of zap pits in it. Zap pits, huh? Yeah. In fact, Tony, the whole area, there's a lot of this rock. There's a lot of this rock here.
These are interesting because they had a glazed surface on top, the 64455 sample. There was this glazed top on it, and then in another part of that sample, there were all these pellet shots in it. I think it's a very, very strong evidence path that our sun has a micronova event on a very regular period of time, and that we're seeing these samples on the moon as evidence of these events.
A consistency of reports from around the world of catastrophes that are amazingly similar. But a lot of people thought it's just what people dream up when they have a lot of time or they're dreaming or whatever. It's just stuff that people naturally come up with. Velikovsky thought it was catastrophes that people witnessed and remembered as very different.
What's called the 4 o'clock rapids, 56 concentric. Actually, it's less than that because these have started to undergo rotation. Here's one on the Navajo Reservation, Bronze Shield, 3rd millennium, Middle East. This is a 56 ray from Kazakhstan. Somebody locked the doors because at this point people are going to start escaping, but this is a 56 ray circle axis mundi from China. And these are actually drawn as paintbrushes, the axis mundi here, the tree coming up in the center. But 56 are there. In Arizona, it's the same thing. Pick that one up. This is unfair. I think the Penumbra dense plasma focus, which also has 56, but it's a plasma, so we would expect it.
It's not what they taught you in school because they gave you it nice and coded. But again, remember, the people in the U.S. government who saw the sun flare up and get the information back from the moon when we brought the stuff back, they were mostly scared. The sun does something terrible. They didn't know when. They felt they had no power to change it. You see, our tools have shown us things that they couldn't have possibly seen 50 and 70 years ago.
Dome Ceiling, Fifth Street Church, Seattle. This is very close to the Forbidden City of China ceiling picture. These ceiling pictures show up, and they generally have 56. This is brand new. This is the Grand Atrium in Saudi Arabia, which is brand new. And again, they didn't draw it circular, but they certainly put 8x7 panels of light around here, as well as some structure in the center. That's Neolithic stone movements. So there are 56 Birkeland filaments in our intense aurora that happened perhaps 4 millennia ago.
And so, Thomas Gold, Bradley Schaefer, Anthony Peratt, Robert Schoch, August Dunning, Douglas Vogt, myself, and literally everybody in the Astronomical Society of Japan, at very, very least, can say that the Carrington event is probably nowhere near as big as the sun can go. The voices from the past supporting this argument come from the Maya, the Aztec, stories in India, China, pagan stories, Aboriginal, African, Polynesian, and those in the Middle East, many of which are recorded in the Bible. During that time, the tunnels were built. During that time, the petroglyphs were carved that blame the sun. Some of the stories actually survived from the pagans of Ragnarok. And this is something that I don't think anyone who studies the sun on long-term scales should really ignore if we're looking to answer the question of what can the sun do to the earth? Because it's one thing to look back at our ancestors and the stories they tell and say, you know what? You guys did a pretty good job inventing geometry, philosophy, architecture. But we're going to just take your most important stories and just going to pretend that you guys are crazy and made them up. That's one giant leap, especially when they could predict eclipses. When somebody wants to build a lander that's going to go onto the moon or it's going to go onto Mars, they have to get as realistic conditions as possible, right? One of the places they get this stuff is the Exolith Lab in Central Florida. We got a bunch of their soils, and we have a bunch here, but you guys remember, we've got a plasma lab, don't we, down in Georgia. The very first time he simulated what this solar flash would do to the moon, to the lunar soil, was absolutely incredible. And then he blasted it. This is the equivalent black glass that they found on the moon. The glazing of some of the rocks that are in there is the exact glazing that was found on the moon. This required no meteoritic impact. It simply required the equivalent of a massive CME or nova shell discharge, or even what is possible through X-rays going through the vacuum. What you got on the left there is a piece of muscovite mica. This was taken here on Earth. It is only the third ever found rare cosmological event, they say. All of the black stuff around there, those are normal fission tracks. That's real cosmic rays. That's what cosmic rays look like when they hit. But there's this exclusion zone around what they call the rare cosmological event. They know for a fact that it's not electrons or positrons, and they represent a residually input positive charge that didn't discharge outward, but it discharged from the center. And it looks exactly like the cosmic jet that blasts out of a star when it's born. It looks like the cosmic jets that you see from the center of a galaxy when it eats a star. And so how do you get a residual positive charge to basically bathe a crystal such that it takes it in and it can't discharge it out? It's still bathed in the stuff. It has to discharge in the center. There's actually missing atoms in the center. Now, they're not really missing. And I would argue that, while not definitive, something tremendous from the sun is not a terrible first hypothesis. The galactic trigger, the dust and gas mechanism for superflares and recurrent nova, the evidence on the moon, the stories of our ancestors, the global nature of the disaster, all point to the sun as the destroyer. But is it a superflare or a micronova? And does it really matter? To look at this question, we will first investigate the recent history of magnetic events on Earth, starting with the one ongoing now. The key element in this overall process is one that has already begun to unfold again here, and the clock is ticking as we move deeper into the shift. We know that Earth's magnetic field has begun an acceleration beyond its normal wander, and coincident with that is the loss of field strength. Magnetic reversals as rapid as 80 years have been recorded in the paleomagnetic record, and we are already more than double that many years into the current shift. While moving more slowly than the record-fast reversals, things have begun to intensify. The Earth's magnetic field is currently decreasing by approximately 5% per decade, with the north and south